Dave. Shout out to each other. It's just tremendous to be together this morning. So my name is Hunter Goodman. I'm an assistant professor with the University of Arkansas System Division of Agriculture Cooperative Extension Service. More importantly, I'm a member of the Higher Education Working Group through Asset-Based Community Development through the Institute here. And I have the pleasure of facilitating this conversation. So these conversations have really come about through this working group coming together and wanting to do something that really compels a conversation around higher education and asset-based community development. The first one was actually about a month ago, give or take, and it was a wonderful success. We received a tremendous group of applicants around doing further conversations. And today we have a great conversation about really how to utilize asset-based community development in grant writing and in facilitating the conversations with community. And so this is part of a series that will continue on, and it's really grounded in our asset-based community development principles as part of the Institute and part of having conversations together. So the way that we are going to move this forward, first of all, if you are part of the working group, the higher ed working group, can you just wave or give a thumbs up so folks know who you are? We have a tremendous group of folks on this, and I think I'd be welcome if folks are interested to join that group. As far as moving forward and the way we're going to do this today, we're going to have some breakout groups here in the beginning, so we have an opportunity to talk with one another and learn a little bit about who we are and what brought us to the call. We'll do 3 of those. Then we'll do an introduction of our speaker. She will give a presentation. We'll have a large group discussion and then break into small groups to close us out. This is scheduled to be an hour and a half, so it's from 11 to 12:30, and it promises great conversation in the spirit of asset-based community development. It is being recorded, so just FYI on that it is being recorded. So Kim, have I forgotten anything in the overview and kind of the jumping in points?
I think that's it. That sounds good.
Fantastic. Well, we are going to send you to breakout groups. The questions, the way we're going to do the breakout groups is I'll say the questions. I'll put them in the chat just to be a reminder when you go into the groups. You will not be able to see the chat, so just capture it. You're just going to say your name and organization and what brought you to this session today. So we're going to get ready to go into that group and do some brief intros and conversation. Only about 4 minutes, So welcome back, friends. I think I see the squares populating with folks coming back into the space. So we did just send you in for a group of about 3 people. So if you only had 3 or 4 in your group, that's the way it was meant to be. And the purpose of that was just to talk about basically what drew you to the session today. In the spirit of ABCD, it's not just about a presenter. It's about the community and about us talking with each other. So we're going to do one more quick one. And this time I'm going to broadcast the question to everyone because I think we might have, it's gotta love Zoom and virtual. Sometimes remembering the question is a challenge. When you go to chat, it disappears. But basically, we're just going to do a really quick breakout again. This one will be about 4 minutes, and it's just the successes you've had incorporating ABCD in your work. So this is the warm-up question before Dr. McCauley brings us in with the presentation. So we will very quickly do a breakout of sort of what are some of the successes that you have incorporated into your ABCD work, and then of course intro, kind of who are you, what and where are you, and that kind of thing. So Kim, if we could do one more quick round, then we'll come back, we'll do our intro and get into our speaker presentation.
Yep, I think everyone's here.
Fantastic. Well, welcome back, friends. I hope we're all warmed up and ready to go for a fantastic conversation. And I just want to recap because we have had several people join during the group. So for the sake of all being on the same page, again, my name is Hunter Goodman. I have the pleasure of being your facilitator today. I'm a member of the Higher Education Working Group for the Asset-Based Community Development Institute here at DePaul. And I'm a faculty member in Community Workforce and Economic Development for the University of Arkansas System Division of Agriculture Cooperative Extension Service. So we're just thrilled to have you. This is part of an ongoing series for higher education practitioners in asset-based community development, but not limited to that. It's a large conversation around our work of asset-based community development. And today we have the tremendous pleasure of hearing from Dr. Angela McCauley. As a reminder, before I introduce Angela, that we are recording today, just as a reminder for that. We will hear from Angela, and then we will move into a large group discussion for a few minutes, and then we'll break into small groups and close us out. So we will have more conversation after Angela's great presentation. So Dr. McCauley is a leader in strategic planning, marketing, and really producing memorable communications. And Angela serves as a director of special instructional projects at Texas Southmost College. She also served as a grant writer for the college prior to joining or taking the role that she's in now. And Angela has really excelled in how to use asset-based community development as a part of the strategy of really uplifting community. And so Angela's going to share that with us today, share some best practices and some applied wisdom around the way that she has used asset-based community development. She's also a part of the communications working group. So if you're hearing a theme, there's ways to get involved in the ABCD network, lots of working groups and things if you're interested in getting involved. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Angela for her to do her presentation. She's going to share her slides, and I'm going to monitor the chat. So as questions come up for you, feel free to put those questions in the chat. If it's something that looks like we need to stop and jump into questions, we will. If not, we'll hold those questions until the end of Angela's presentation and answer them at that point. So please put questions in the chat as we go along. And Angela, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Boy, those breakout rooms really gave me a lot of energy. We've got folks from nonprofit organizations looking to maybe learn a few new things or at least be affirmed in the direction that they're going. In grant writing, we've got people who are grant makers and looking to see how they can maybe adjust the way they do their business. I'm interested in all of it, and unfortunately we only have a limited amount of time today, but I say that because I'm interested in continuing this conversation in any format that we can, one-on-one or small groups or whatever, as we move forward. So this today is to kind of whet your appetite, get a taste, and get the conversation going. That's how I'm looking at it. So as Hunter said, I am the Director of Special Instructional Projects at Texas Southmost College. Most of my instructional projects fall at the intersection of technical writing and project management. So a lot of opportunity for asset-based work in my area. Texas Southmost College, if the name doesn't give it away, we're at the very southern tip of Texas, where Texas and Mexico and the Gulf of Mexico all meet. And I'll tell you, as a grant writer, I served at the college full-time as a grant writer for a while. I was really bothered by the way that our region was often described in national arenas, a poor, uneducated population plagued by drug violence. And so while there are some statistics to support some of this narrative, it was often presented as the whole truth. And those of us who lived here knew that this was only part of our truth. And so how did this play out in grant writing? Those of you who do grant writing, you know that the traditional grant writing framework consists of a deficit-based charity model. These models concentrate power among the philanthropic organizations and funding agencies and oppressing citizens by positioning them only as consumers of goods rather than as reciprocal problem solvers and architects of their own future. So grant writers and their community leaders in this model are often forced to describe their neighbors only by their emptiness. Poor, homeless, school dropout. And I knew there had to be a better way. So I started looking, who's doing this work in an asset-based way? Who's doing this really well? And I came across the ABCD Institute And it was just life-changing. I found my people, right? People who were doing this work, and I learned the terminology and learned a few tools. And so that's what I want to share with you today. I'm going to share my screen. Here we go. Is everybody seeing the presentation? Yeah, okay, good. First, I want to point out that there's many great resources that teach you the mechanics of how to write successful grants. I know this because I earned a graduate certificate in grants and proposals from Texas Tech. But this presentation is really not about how to write a grant. So I offer you this perspective. Organizational missions declare what you set out to achieve. So think about that as the mechanics of writing a grant, right? That's our mission. My presentation today is a philosophy of grant writing, how we engage in this work. So specifically, a social justice oriented philosophy of grant writing. As I mentioned, when I started my research, I had the opportunity to attend a training at the ABCD Institute. And there was a statement by our presenter, who happens to be a leader in the ABCD Institute, said that, oh my gosh, it was such an aha moment. She said, people used to do the thing, then that thing became professionalized, like grant writing. Now we want people to do that thing again. So my reaction was, yes. How can we bring citizens back into the grant writing process? How can we honor and incorporate local wisdom and knowledge we need to design better programming? And for those of you who may be new to asset-based community development, I'm going to share this slide with the values. And you can, as I go through my presentation, you'll kind of see how they're woven into the work that we do. I referenced this list many times when reconsidering how to flip our own paradigm in grant writing. So first, I argue that we must understand grant writing as a conduct, not a process. So slapping together a proposal in isolation, often positioning a nonprofit organization as a hero swooping in to save underserved population, right? That's oppression. So instead, we need to be mindful of our own conduct and how we develop our proposal. This chart is from one of the handouts that I attended the ABCD workshop, and it helped to reset our own administration's thinking in the course that we would take in doing this work. So we put our college in this second column, right? That's traditional social services model, focusing on the need. What do our students need? What problems do they have? Our goal is to provide really excellent service. But then look at the ABCD approach, and you can kind of see how we need to change our thinking, focusing on our assets, investing in our students. Our goal is empowerment. Our power comes from relationships. I also started a personal campaign against deficit-based language in grant writing. I'll share an example from the American Friends Service Agency. One of my research participants talked about a banned word list she co-creates with her grant writing students each semester. So they agree, we will not use words such as at risk, homeless, undereducated, and then they brainstorm alternatives. So you can see just kind of this before and after, just as a real simple example, serving students at risk instead of serving people who are experiencing marginalizations due to systemic barriers. So that's one thing that I campaign. But I have a few colleagues on the call, and they'll attest to that. I do a little bit of editing still, and I'm always looking for those to have an opportunity to present things in an asset-based way. So during the course of my dissertation research, I was able to implement some of these ABCD tools into my own work, kind of like building the plane while you're flying it, right? I was doing the research and had an opportunity to engage in this, engage in a grant process. So I'll share a little bit, a few tools that we did. They're standard ABCD tools, but I'll show you how we incorporated it into our grant writing process. So this first slide is a photo of me facilitating, which consisted mostly of explaining to grown adults over and over what silent reflection means, but I'll come to that later. Each year, community colleges across the nation apply for Carl Perkins grant funding, which is intended to strengthen career and technical education programs. That is programs who specialize in skilled trades, applied sciences, modern technology, career preparation. So funding is awarded through a formula based on the number of CTE students your college has. and you must present a proposal on how you're going to use your funds to improve CTE programming. So traditionally at our college, we would get together and our AVP would meet with our deans. These are all triangles. These represent decision makers in the organization. So we would meet and we would say, bring your shopping list. What do you need, health professions, to improve your CTE program? What kind of equipment do you need? What's on your wish list? And that's how we would write our grant proposal. These are the things that we want to shop for to make our program better. 2 years ago, the rules of the game for Carl Perkins funding changed. All of a sudden, the new law mandated that college must gather stakeholder input and report out how they use this to create the comprehensive local needs assessment. Now, aside from the deficit-based terminology of needs assessment, it's a great idea, right? Why don't we ask students, families, employers, our K through 12 partners? What would make a difference? What would make a difference to improve our CTE programming from your point of view? Because of the changes in the law, this is how our stakeholder process transformed. So in ABCD, they talk about the geometry of decision making. As I said, the triangles are our decision makers at our college, and the circles are our stakeholders. So we had several different stakeholder groups. We had a group of students, we had families, we talked to a group of faculty, administrators, and we kind of segmented them so that we really wanted their authentic voice. We didn't want to put faculty with administrators, right? And have people kind of hang back and not want to talk about what they really thought. So when we had these stakeholder meetings, and I'll run you through the activities in a moment, this is how we tried to structure them. I'll point out that according to ABCD, this is not an ABC stakeholder process, having your decision makers at the table with your stakeholders, because inevitably one of your stakeholders is going to say, well, I think what we need to do is have more childcare, and the triangle is going to say, oh, well, we did that, or oh, the state regulations don't account for that, or you're going to have a stakeholder who's going to say, well, I think we should do X, and the triangle will say, we don't have money for that. So you really want to make sure that you have your circles talking about the agenda, that they have an authentic way, and that your triangles are there just to facilitate the conversation, get somebody a pen, direct people to the restroom, whatever it is, gather the data. So in one of my breakout sessions, we were talking about data, right? Trying to gather data to make a case for what you want to do. And so we did this. We talked about how CTE students from special populations are performing in programs compared to general population. We talked about groups of students who are struggling the most in the CTE programs. We talked about performance gaps, right? We were doing this behind the scenes administratively. But where our team departed from the deficit-based model was through the data we collected from our focus groups with students, with families, faculty. So what we did is we came up with our questions. We took the deficit-based questions that were offered as guidance in our grant, and we flipped them to asset-based questions. So instead of talking about, for example, the last one, what do educators report as needs and preferences for benefits and supports? We all get that question, right? We talked about it in my breakout session. We talked about what types of benefits and supports make the most impact on faculty recruitment and retention. So even though we were given some guidance from our grant about questions to ask, we made sure we were asking them in an asset-based way. So that was kind of step one. So how did we gather the data to answer these questions? First, we conducted an asset mapping exercise. This really set the tone for the visioning session that followed by introducing participants to a collection of assets already present in the community. Again, this is ABCD 101, right? Asset mapping. So we put up big post-it notes, those great big huge ones, with an asset category on each one, and we had people walk around with a magic marker. What are our individual assets, associations, institutional, and so on, that we already have in place to support our CTE students and improve our CTE program? So you can see on the slide under individuals, for example, we said the librarian is a great asset for our students, And career advising is a great asset. We have a budget, actually, the program does. So that's an asset that we have. This really, again, kind of put people in the mindset of we have a lot going for us. And as they're looking, right, on what everybody else has written, they're getting ideas of that they might not have known about. So with these assets in mind, we then move to the World Cafe activity. Again, another ABCD tried and true tool. And so what we did is we covered our tables with butcher paper, and we gave out markers, and everybody kind of split into groups. We had our series of questions, those asset-based questions that I talked about earlier, customized for each group. And so we said 2 minutes of silent reflection. Think about the answer to this question. You know, what support do we have in place that, or have you seen in place at other places that would really support our students in being able to complete their program? What I love about the silent reflection is, y'all, we've all been to those conference roundtable things, and there's like a couple of dominant people, right, who are chitter-chattering about their idea, and you don't even have time to think about yours, especially if you're an introvert. So this silent reflection kind of levels the playing field. Everybody really gets to think about their idea. And then after the 2 minutes is up, you go around, everybody has 2 minutes to explain their drawing. So the introverts, you know, get to talk about their thoughts and their feelings. They get equal time, the experts. And then everybody gets up and mixes and rotates tables for the next question, except for one person who serves as your table host. The table host sits there and recaps the conversation for 1 minute to the new group. So what this does is you benefit from all the information that you had at your first table, right, that you participated in, and then you're also learning at what happened at a table different from you. So you get a little bit wider variety of views. I will take a break and tell you that one of the things that we really tried to refine, because we're academics, is how do we get all this data? How do we capture it, right? Because our administrators got into this exercise. They had their own, right? We had our own stakeholder session for them, and they were hearing things that they were so fired up about, because we had them with our K through 12 partners. And they were saying there were so many good ideas. And when we got to the vote at the end, which I'm kind of jumping to the lead, you know, we didn't capture everything. Even though that we got the best ideas, we want all the ideas. So we ended up putting a scribe at each table, just things for you to think about, like how important is it for you to capture every idea? We had a staff member, a scribe, who did not participate at all, who just kind of jotted down all of the ideas that they heard. I don't know, I feel like there's pros and cons to this, right? Because now you have somebody kind of listening in, and are you being judged, or I don't know. But I just offer that as, you know, kind of working with your team. And again, kind of building the plane while we were flying it. How were we going to capture this data? What level of detail did we need? What this process does is, instead of wallowing in what is wrong with CTE programming, we framed our questions in an asset-based perspective. We asked participants to describe what's working well, either in our own institution or things they had seen elsewhere. And then those positive examples could then be considered for replication and scalability to bolster student success. I mean, full transparency, you always have people who kind of got caught up in, oh, we don't have enough of this, or we don't have enough of that. And so, you know, you can just kind of gently steer them, you know, well, what would it take? What would make it possible? What have you seen work elsewhere to kind of guide that conversation back to an asset-based conversation? So participants, I mean, they were sharing their dreams, they were sharing their ideas with each other in a larger group. We then moved into a group discussion. These are examples of some of the questions that we used for the big group discussion. And then we actually handed out papers with these questions on them, whatever the questions were for the group, and asked them to kind of record the best ideas that they heard that day. What's the most important next step we can take? And this was kind of their vote, right? So we could identify themes of what people really felt were important to them. So what did we do then? Back to grant writing, right? Although that was all part of the process, grant writing is a conduct. We analyzed our statistical data I had talked about earlier behind the scenes, our focus group data, we drafted our strategic plan, and then we crafted our grant proposal with this budget aligned to the CTE strategic plan. So no matter what the questions were in the grant, right, whether they were deficit-based or needs-based or whatever they were, we knew that we had done our work in an asset-based way and where we were headed. I was sharing with some of our folks in the breakout room that you always get that question, what's the need, you know, through this grant? And so I would offer, our need is for you to partner with us, right? We know where we're going. This is how much we can do on our own, right? That's what ABCD said. What can you do totally on your own? What can you do with a little bit of help? And what do you maybe need a partner for? So we'll talk about that in our grant narrative. So this is one model for how grant writers can engage in their work as a conduct using the tools from ABCD. I argue that this asset-based model of grant writing promotes the integration of social justice and technical communication. We're honoring citizens' local knowledge, skills, and social connections as critical assets for transforming communities. And I would be happy to answer any questions you have, open it for discussion.
Fantastic, Angela. What a tremendous presentation. You're not monitoring the chat, but you're getting all kinds of, what a great idea, great thoughts, etc. You know, in here. So if we, in terms of the questions, either just raise your hand and jump in or add to the chat. Angela, we do have a question that had come up when you were presenting, and that is when you did the World Cafe, how many rounds did you do for that?
We did 3. We thought that was enough. I mean, you can kind of judge. We did 3 questions because we scheduled 90 minutes for the whole thing. You know, that included the asset mapping, the little lunch. We just felt like we couldn't take more time than that for our outside groups, especially.
And then there was a question that also came up about, you know, are there groups that fund ABCD type grant applications? So language that's ABCD related in the application.
I mean, yes, right. You're going to find some. We talked about this in one of the breakout rooms. You know, I have personally seen in some of the larger foundations, Ford Foundation, Gates Foundation, you know, they've learned, they've written about and publicized how they are making these asset-based turns. And I shared, I mean, that's the hard work I want to get to at some point, right? Working with funders, helping them not only adjust their language, that's part of it, but when you dig a little bit deeper, it's like language is one thing, but really where the power is centralized is a whole nother thing. Who's serving on their boards? Who's making these decisions? Do they have regular, every average day citizens who would benefit from these grants, you know, helping judge? Program's really going to make a difference. Are you solving for the right problem? We didn't even get into that, right? Like, are you solving for the right problem with this grant proposal, or did you just do it like we used to do, just kind of in a room on our own? So, so yes, there's a lot of foundations who are making that turn, but it is, I have found in my research participants affirm that that the whole industry right now is still kind of plugging along on that deficit-based road.
If anyone has a question for Angela, jump in. I saw a hand and then I think it went down. So if someone has a question, you know, for Angela, please jump in.
I do have a question. Hi, Angela. My name is Darren from the University of Pittsburgh. My question is around timing, right? Oftentimes we know that our timing is not the foundation's timing, nor is our timing the community's timing, right? So how do you manage to do such a thorough ABCD led process within very short time constraints?
That's a great question. My argument is you should just be doing this work. This should just be the work of your organization. And then you've got this plan in place, right? And then when an RFP pops up that matches that, then you have all of this in place. So you're going to plug along for a while, kind of doing the best you can, right? Incrementally. But if this work is authentically going on in the background, then you're just going to be ready when they pop up. And I argue too that this, you know how you get trapped into those things like chasing the money, like, oh, this RFP came up, we need to hurry up and adapt and get our thing together. And some of that you're going to do, but I think that this kind of deliberate process behind the scenes is really going to help you be ready for when that right RFP comes in, and it's going to help guide your searches too, right? Because then you're going to be solving for your problems. You're going to have your plan in place, and you're going to be searching for things that support your plan, not just trying to adapt to whatever RFP somebody sends you, right? We all get this. Your boss sends you one. Let's apply for it. And so you can argue, you know, whether you're successful or not. Does this fit into our asset-based plan that we have already lined up?
Thank you. So it sounds like if you're doing this work and you have the relationships, time constraints shouldn't matter, right?
I mean, we just do the best we can. We all get sucked into some that we just have to turn around. But you know, I mean, we're human too. When those come around and you're like, oh my gosh, we've never asked our stakeholders about this particular thing. We need to get that on our agenda for this coming year, right? You just do the best you can. I do have a couple of colleagues on the line that went through this process with me. You guys feel free to chime in if you have something I've forgotten or anything to add.
Angela, we did have a question about most of the work of academic research is about solving a problem, kind of deficit-based. So how do you think research can be refocused around what's working well?
You know, I in my research, there's this, gosh, I wish I had her name at the top of my tongue, but there's a movement, you all can look at it, called promiscuous feminism. And so what they're doing is taking these asset-based kind of feminist approaches to really what was considered hardcore scientific work, right? Kind of that real binary. So that's a whole nother tangent. I won't get into it now, but to look at. But when you're talking about research, if you're talking about scientific research, I don't know if that's what the question is. That's what I'm. Oh, here we go. Somebody's putting in here community-based participatory research. Let me tell you. Let me give you an example of what one of my research participants posed to me, and see if this is helpful at all. So they were in California, working in a housing complex, like a subsidized housing complex that they were working with. They had a grant, and so trying to help people prepare to be placed into jobs. And so the problem was that 40% of the people were not employed in, you know, sustainable wage kind of jobs. And so that was kind of the problem. So what they did is they flipped that and they said, well, what are these 60% of the people doing that is getting them into jobs, that is making them successful? Let's look at that, right? Let's look at the assets. So you don't ignore that there's something you want to change. That's what we're about, right? About transforming our communities and creating change. But we're not dwelling on the negative problems of it, because you're just going to wallow there, right? Let's look at the 60% that are doing well. What assets do they have? What characteristics? And how can we move more folks into a position to benefit from that? I don't know if that's helpful.
So Angela, one thing too is, I'm wondering if folks could jump in on what concept or idea. There's a lot of energy in the chat, which is awesome. But as Angela and I were brainstorming this beforehand, kind of one of the questions is what concept or idea that was shared today in Dr. McCauley's presentation that's standing out for you, that's really jumping out. And you don't have to say it on the group. You can just put it in the chat if you'd rather, but we'd love to hear that. What's really jumping out for you as you hear her presentation?
Kind of scrolling through the chat too to try and catch some questions.
This is Melvin Leach in Joliet, Illinois, at the Harvey Brooks Foundation. What's standing out to me from the presentation is using the community that I'm from and where I do my work, and remembering the assets that we bring to the table, and not just looking at us as a deficit model, but what do we have historically, family, things that are an asset to us, and using that to benefit the grants that we are seeking.
Yeah. Yeah, I try to think of grant writers. There's a lot of us who are professional grant writers, right? That's what we do. And some of my research participants, my ABCD faculty, was like, there should not be grant writers. That there should be no professionalism about it. It should come all grassroots. It should come from the organization. But what I would say is, there's this money out here. We're in, that's available to further the projects that we have in mind. And the most important role that we can serve as professional grant writers is as connectors. Like, here's where you can get data to support what you're saying. I can help you format, your ideas that you have, and access to software. I mean, sometimes folks aren't registered in grants.gov. We can help with that kind of thing, but just making sure that it's really community driven is the ideal. In our situation, co-creation was what we were going for, and I think it made a big difference. We, just as a concrete example, instead of just applying for funding for equipment in our Carl Perkins grant, we moved a lot of our money into hiring a person to do kind of case management with students. Reaching out to them, connecting them with resources was a huge thing. We have all these resources in our community, but our students, they aren't experts in knowing how to access them. So that was a big switch in how we used our money, because of the asset mapping, because we figured out, that all of these assets that we have, and just getting people connected to them. So that was a concrete example of how we switched our proposal.
So I have a question, please. I noticed that in the examples that you use, the language starts to get more. There's more words, and I think you know where I'm going with this. Very often when I'm applying for grants, we have not only word count but character counts, including spaces, and so I'm a little alarmed. Can you speak a little to that?
That is a great question, because that's really important. I struggled with that too in talking with ABCD. When I talk about my research, I got to talk to all these ABCD stewards and faculty members who've been doing this work their whole lives. So that's where a lot of it is now. I'm passing on, right, what they shared with me. So one of them said to me, don't get hung up on trying to explain ABCD in your proposal. You're doing your good work. You're doing all this work ahead of time, or as you're building it as you're flying, if you were me. So don't get hung up in trying to explain all of it. Talk about your program. Talk about where you need this partnership to move your program forward, and just kind of move on. And then afterwards, if you have some program officers that you have a real relationship with, you can talk about your asset-based perspective and how it can be used as a model. But if you're doing the work authentically, you don't need to explain it all in your proposal. You don't need to try. He said, don't try to convert them in your proposal. Get your proposal, get your money, and then convert them through the work that you're doing.
I can see not having to explain ABCD in and of itself. I mean, I've been doing enough work that I can kind of get away with not having to do that. But in the descriptions, like even just, and I think that's probably where these institutions created these shortcuts, that we ended up with this kind of negative language, and just having to get away from that. I know there's another movement in the grant writing world to get away from putting those kinds of limits on, because they're so artificial.
Yeah.
So Angela, we have had a question come in. I don't want to cut you off if you're responding there. So there's a question about how does an ABCD strategy balance between identifying assets while knowing that many marginalized communities are truly operating at a deficit with limited resources, thus possibly causing further disengagement or overuse of current resources?
Yeah, I don't know that I fully have an answer to that question because, you know, I live in one of those areas. I mean, there was a lawsuit that proved South Texas had been underfunded in higher education because of discrimination for decades. You know, and we're still dealing with that. We still don't have equal opportunity, equal access to PhD programs. We still don't have equal access to all of these kind of things because it's been historically, right? It's been systemic. So I'm looking at the question in the chat, identifying assets, knowing that we are truly opposite in the deficit base. You know, I don't know if this is going to answer the question, but this is the philosophy that I have and that many of our leaders have had, is that we know that with just a little bit of opportunity, a little bit of investment, our folks, you know, can operate at the same level as students anywhere. We've proven that, and we win national chess championships, we win science fair things, you know, that show that the intellect is the same. But we also show that we haven't had the same kind of investment. A former college president used to say to her colleagues in other areas of the state, you know, we're in a relay race, and you guys all have tennis shoes, and you're making us go barefoot. And so we have the same kind of talent, we just haven't had the same kind of investment. That's how we approach it. We know the talent and the personal assets, the personal capacity of our region is up to par of anyone. We haven't had the same investment. No, I don't know if that answers the question. It's a struggle. It's a struggle.
We're going to take one more question, and then we're going to break into some small group conversations. So Sydney, I think you had your hand raised.
No, actually the question that I posed was in the chat box, so I was, responding to that. I was just going to say I find it really interesting because I do quite a bit of work in this area, and when we were focused about the the asset-based focus, I'm always thinking about when you brought up the idea of power, right? How does power kind of play out? And I was just wondering how. In ABC, how does power play out? How do you keep that authenticity to understanding the power dynamics, even the idea of funding organization, having, creating the framework in which an organization must operate in order for them to be successful at gaining funds. So thinking about that, leveraging that as compared to someone or an organization's capacity and the assets that they have, it almost seems like that onus is placed upon the organization to first show what they've already been doing, even though when you're working with marginalized populations, that they're working at capacity already. So I don't know, that's where my thoughts, line of thought was going.
No, I love it. And I don't have all the answers to that. I was just really struck by, again, one of my research participants who was called in to be consultants for different funding organizations. And, he just said so many things that resonated with me. And I don't know how we get there in a perfect way, but he was saying, you have all these people on your board who are privileged, who are wealthy, who have never experienced things that these folks are, the people that the grant is aiming to serve, and you're having them make the decision on what's going to make the most difference. He's like, that. Why does that even make sense? Who are your, first look at your decision makers. And then furthermore, how are you, limiting the creativity that you would get if you didn't always have somebody submit a 10-page narrative? Is there a different way you should be accepting proposals? So he asked a lot of questions. I don't have all the answers to that, but it sure did make me think about it.
So there is so much energy happening in this chat. It is electrifying, great points and questions. We're going to move to some breakout sessions. Keep the energy going. There's 2 questions that I just put in the chat for the breakouts. And again, we'll broadcast these questions out. But as you go into your breakout sessions, kind of think about in what ways does the presentation, the story shared, make you think about your work differently? And then what are some of the ways that your imagination has been sparked for what you can do to work on change kind of from the inside out? So Dr. McCauley, fantastic job. Thank you.
That you all felt like you got a lot out of it. This is going to be recorded. Yeah, so in a couple days, I'll send the recording to all the participants. And I want to thank Hunter for facilitating today. Just really appreciate that. And thank all of you for participating. We're just really happy and overwhelmed by how many of you showed up today. So couple other things. This is a series that started last month and is going to go at least through June. If we may do another version of this series, but we have enough presentations for the next several months. And next month, we're going to have, on March 15th, we're going to have Kimberly Schmidt of the University of Utah. And she's going to be talking about her experience working with university neighborhood relationships as partners. And that's going to be facilitated by Evis Garcia, who is an ABCD steward and also at the University of Utah. I want to mention also, if anybody is interested, we are running we're just finishing up our winter ABCD Institute training that finishes this Saturday. And we're going to be doing another one that starts March 16th. And I will put that in the chat. Just so in case anyone's interested, you can take a look at that. And lastly, at the ABCD Institute, we do have this higher ed working group. And it's basically a group that has gotten together. It started with just stewards of the Institute, but we're opening it up to people who are working in higher ed and who may be interested. The group's purpose is to really share resources and information. And this year the focus was to come up with these set of events that we can broaden what we're learning and sharing. And so if you're interested in that, if you could send me just an email letting me know, that you're interested in joining, and I'm going to put my email in the chat. I'm Kim Hopes, and that would be great. I will get you connected to that group. And is there anything else? I don't know, anybody, Jenny or Hunter, or anything else that I might be missing? I think we're good. So thank you so much. And I hope we'll be sending out information again on the next one. And I hope to see you back here in a month. Thanks very much. Have a great day, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. I put my email in the chat too, in case anybody wants to stay connected. I'd love to.
Excellent. Bye-bye. Thank you.